You're listening to The Knowledge Spot, your number one resource for sharing information that promotes success, personal development, and happiness. I'm your host, Jared Cherry, and my goal is to shed a light on the strategies, mindsets, and routines that have led to each of my guests' individual success. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen, and I hope you enjoy what we have in store. Hi everyone, thank you for listening to this episode of The Knowledge Spot. Today I have a guest and another former teacher of mine. His name is Anthony Michelli, and Anthony is a professional drummer and teacher at several universities and post-secondary institutions. And it's worth noting, Anthony, that I had the privilege of taking part in your Cuban ensemble this past summer, and one of the other guests we've had on here before was Brian Katz, who I've also been part of his klezmer ensemble at school, and both of you had to deal with a similar situation where you were essentially given a group of musicians who have experience playing music, reading music, writing music, blah, 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 and then another group of students who have never been exposed to music in their life, perhaps beyond their iPad or their iPod rather. And I'm wondering, what's it like for you to have to work together with these two different types of students?
Yeah, that's great. A great question. First of all, I just want to say hello and thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this. This is a really great thing that you're doing, and your mission statement on your website is the appeal for me to want to do this. I really am impressed with what you're doing, and I'm really happy that you've asked me to be a part of it. So that, first off, is probably more important.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great. Dealing with musicians and non-musicians in a course like that, which you took at the university there, is interesting because I guess music is pretty much meant to be enjoyed by everyone, whether you're a musician or not, and whether you could read music or write music. And I guess when you think of it on that level, to me that's pretty important to reach out to the non-musician just as much as it is to the person who's actually trying to get more knowledge as a professional, for instance.
Right.
So, and I think about like places like Africa or Cuba or Brazil, or where there's not really always a school system that's formalized. It's pretty much learning through ritual or through everyday life, and I try to keep that in the back of my mind, even with the professional, because I sometimes find that professionals tend to get a little too heady with their studies, and which is good for your focus, I think, but also sometimes it takes away from that sort of understanding that music is something that should be accessible,
right,
and understood and appreciated by all. And no matter how deep you go or how complicated things can get, that always has to be there, in my opinion. And so I kind of, in that particular class you're talking about, I kind of enjoy it because sometimes we assume that the professional actually knows what's going on, and sometimes they need to sort of feel it on that really basic instinctual level and not just reading it or understanding it from an academic standpoint, So
definitely.
Yeah, I really enjoy those classes, to be honest with you. And sometimes they go a little slower, but I think that we can dig a little deeper as a result, and even the pro can actually dig deeper if they're into it.
Yeah, I totally agree there, and I even found with myself is just trying to help people the best I could, based on my own experiences, is that I found that while trying to help these people who had no musical background, I kind of was able to learn more about what my own capabilities were, how well I understood certain concepts, certain rhythmic concepts, and how well I could even explain these concepts outside of my own head. So it was actually very much a learning experience for me too, just being part of these ensembles.
Yeah, I really did appreciate having you in that classroom, and I do rely on people with more experience like yourself. And I noted that you're making a pretty big effort to make to sort of do what you just said that you were learning about, and I think that's the beauty of it, is that you're coming from a more advanced standpoint and maybe some more experience, but then on another level you're learning about not only the content, but you're learning about how to help others, and that's priceless, because It's community, right? It's not just I want to be the best person in this room. It becomes we are going to work together and make it happen, and that's so valuable for me in those classes. So yeah, yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you enjoyed it on that level as well as learning some material.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that you think that way because it speaks true to experiences that I've been through. So my background with music, I don't see this was the issue with that class is we had so much stuff to go over in so little time that I had a gazillion questions for you personally, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt on class time, so I figured, I knew the podcast was coming. I'm just gonna have him on as a guest, and I'm happy we're finally here now. But yeah, what you're saying, it makes me very happy to hear because my musical background, and I've said this many times on the podcast, and a lot of listeners know this already, but I always say I came from a garage band background, so when I got into university for music, I really passed my audition based on my playing alone. I walked out of the theory test within like 5-10 minutes because I just didn't know anything there,
Hmm.
and so as I came into, on top of that, I was a lot older than the other students, right?
Hmm.
So when I came into music school this last year, I immediately learned of like this kind of musical bully that I would call a musical snob, and I had never been exposed to this kind of elitist attitude in the music community because the garage band people I played with, we never said, go up an eighth here or go up an octave. It was, make it sound a bit more like this, or we
Yeah.
would use sounds and more basic understandings, and when I started to play with musicians who had more of an educational background, I was astonished at just the level of snobbiness and, in my opinion, just how overrated a musical education can be. Because it's exactly as you said. There's cultures around the world where, maybe they can't afford a traditional music school or a Western style school for whatever reason, or maybe they don't even want to pursue that kind of education, and they're just as capable of understanding music, albeit with different terms, as someone with an formal background is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think, even the India, if we look into some of the Indian culture and understanding, I mean, there's so much behind that that's not just musical. There's so much behind the music that's not purely musical or theoretical that it's a bigger picture. And when you go to become specifically trained to be accurate or adept at a particular thing, tendency might be at first to be very specific and maybe a little bit snobby, or as you were putting it, uh, I think that people come to realize after a certain point in education that you move away from that because the knowledge is there, right?
Right.
It's kind of like when you learn new words as a young adult or in elementary school, going into high school or whatever, and you start to try and practice and use them. And it doesn't sound as natural as someone just speaking off the cuff, sort of thing. I think you know the intelligence that you accumulate through the years will come out, but if you force it out, it feels unnatural. So I find that sometimes when people are learning, they have to go through the process of pushing things out, and sometimes it's positive, and sometimes it's not so positive. And eventually, I think the ones that the musicians that end up carrying on and having successful careers and actually longevity and great relationships and um, just general success on that level. I'm not talking financial, but I'm talking about just, you know,
Right.
that's that side of success. Um, they get past all that, and you realize at the end of it, it's all about playing music, and it has nothing to do with flexing your knowledge. And I think the music asks you that. So when it's required in the music, and you have the knowledge, that's when it should naturally come out. But when you force that knowledge out and you put it upon a situation that doesn't need it, then it comes out as being contrived or unnatural or unpleasant. And generally people filter that stuff out. I find through the years. when I'm playing music with people, you can kind of tell when somebody's trying to prove something or when somebody's playing the music, right?
Right, for sure, and it comes off kind of like as even if you want to bring it to a broader life notion, it kind of comes off as someone trying too hard, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I've had like guitar players who you go and sit down and jam with them. This actually happened to me last year. I got invited to jam
Hmm.
in between my classes, and I thought, okay, to me, a jam coming from a garage band is you're gonna play a bass line, I'm gonna hit the beat, and we're just gonna get going.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe what happened when I got in there. That the first thing the guy does is turn on a metronome,
Okay.
and he
Yeah.
goes,
Yeah.
"We're gonna play. Um, we're gonna. It's the metronome's going in 4/4 time, but we're gonna count it like it's 3/4 time. It's just this overly
Yeah.
complicated, trying too hard kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I don't want to stray listeners into thinking that I'm completely disregarding the importance of a musical education, because truth be told, if there's one wish I have is that I had pursued an education in music much earlier, because I do think it has its benefits. But just like you're saying, if it's something you're going to force on a music experience as a whole, which happens to be a very natural human thing, um, it's going to be very obvious to people, and it's certainly unappealing in my experience.
Yeah, I can agree with you. I think in a situation where somebody's pulling out a metronome and has a specific agenda on what's going on, I mean, like you said, it doesn't really fit into the jam sort of definition. I mean, there's value to saying, let's practice this concept together. Here's something I'm checking out. You want to try and work through this with me?
Definitely.
That's, I mean, that's pretty. Um, I think that's a valid thing, but when you are dictating what other people should be doing at a jam session, or that becomes an uncomfortable situation, and no one really needs to deal with that. And I think again, as you grow as a human being, you realize, hopefully, that it maybe you start realizing what's working and what's not with people. You know what I mean? And you curb your desires to want to do certain things. Your filter starts to kick in a little bit more.
Exactly.
So but I guess you can't. I guess we have to be patient with each other in this world and try and figure out how to make it work, because we all have multiple agendas going at the same time, and I think that's a very tricky part of life in general, but in music, it's even also very apparent. People have hidden agendas, and so we have to be patient and sort of accepting a little bit and try and see if it's right for us at the time. And hopefully, people will come around always. That's a big thing too. And I just wanted to say that back to the student thing. I mean, that's part of it as well. Over the course of teaching like a year's worth of material to a student, I'll see a kid coming in with their own agenda and then going out with a totally different view of things. And not because I want to stray them away from what their focus is, it's just because people have these preconceived notions of what they need to do, and which is good. I mean, it's good to have goals in mind, but I think it's very important also along the way to have an open mind and to be able to accept what comes your way and realize that it's all valid. It's not just the stuff on your list that's valid, right? It might be more important to you at the time, but I think a well-rounded musician or a well-rounded student or human being, period, is open to that. So that's kind of my headspace on that sort of thing.
Right. It reminds me of Are you familiar with Nick Ruffini by any chance? He's
Oh
the
yeah, yeah. Nick's great, and
Yeah,
his
he's
podcast's
amazing.
great. Yeah, I love him.
His podcast, The Drummer's Research, is one of my favorite podcasts, and we had him on as a guest here, and
Yeah,
he speaks exactly what you're saying. Where to him, if you want to be a good drummer, it's not about, like he said, the worst thing is when he meets a drummer who says, "Oh, I'm a jazz drummer, I'm a rock drummer, I'm a funk drummer," and that's that. To him, a good drummer is someone who you're getting hired for a Cuban gig, you know what you're going to do, so that, you get hired for a jazz gig, you also know what you do. And yeah, you can have your favorites, what you like playing more, but to him, you have to have that exact same kind of open-mindedness when you're approaching music, and really shed an elitist attitude, and just be willing to sometimes compromise, I suppose, and go beyond your what you expect.
yeah. I agree. I mean, um, yeah, I'm not interested in proving myself. I'm interested in playing great music with great people. I don't feel like that's an important thing, and I think that that's a good attitude to have. I think it's good to know a lot about many things and have things that you're like, and also know what perhaps your focus is as a musician. Um, I mean, there are definitely specific musicians who play certain styles and only those styles, and there's nothing wrong with that because we do need specialists as just as much as we need people who are capable of doing several things. But I think it's a headspace, not only style choice, but also a headspace of that openness. So, I mean, Nick's a great guy. He's got a lot of open perspective, and he's a smart man, and he conducts great interviews, and he knows the value of all those different artists. And I think that's a pretty special thing. And he's definitely a great person to have interviewed for sure.
Yeah, he was fascinating. I was honored to take part of that. I do want to segue a little bit, Anthony, and go
Yeah.
back to what you mentioned just a little bit earlier. You talked about how a great musician also has this ability to kind of filter out all the I don't want to say the noise, but all the unnecessary components of music. And this is another story I've been wanting to tell you for a while. I first came across you. I was on my lunch break at school, and I was just walking by the musical lounge, and I heard music. So of course I'm going to go see. And I walk in there, and it's a jazz kind of concert going on, right, in
Mm.
a relaxed setting. And you're on the drums, but I have no idea who you are at the time. And I'm watching you play, and first of all, I could tell you were just amazing because it sounded good. But what you were doing specifically that impressed me is you were playing what I would consider to be very complicated drum parts, but not taking away from the rest of the music. And if I can go on another tangent here for a second, in my experience, I find that there's really two kinds of good drummers, and there's the one kind who keeps it simple, hits the backbeat, and it's not taking away anything from the music. And sorry, not two kinds of good drummers, but just two kinds of drummers in general. So I see those kind that really focus on keeping it simple, and then I see the other kind who are able to sometimes even overcomplicate things. And what I really appreciated about your performance was that you found the middle road there where it was amazing to see what you're doing, and it was very technically requiring skill, but it was not taking away from the rest of the music. And I'm wondering, as a drummer, I think that's a dilemma we're constantly forced to deal with, where yes, we're the rhythmic component of the music for the most part, and that requires being a foundation that people can fall back on. At the same time, there's drummers who want to be able to express themselves further than that. And how do we go about developing that kind of skill set where you can filter out, right now I have the ability to play something a little more complicated, and right now I need to hold back a bit?
Well, that's a great question, and I should thank you for the compliments because I didn't even see you there. I
No,
didn't
no
even know you were there.
worries.
So thanks for listening. Sometimes we play these concerts and we wonder if anyone's actually there listening, even though we see people in front of us. Um, yeah, I mean that's the reality of our industry, I think, and things have changed quite a bit. I don't know. I'm a little bit older, and so I mean, all the online stuff now is pretty massive. It's grown to be this huge uh, resource.
Right.
In another sense, it's also grown into this thing that can gnaw at your ankle. You know what I mean? Like you go back to it, and there's some 7-year-old kid who's going crazy, and his dad's promoting him or whatever because he's super proud of him, which is amazing. And then that sometimes can become maybe subliminally a benchmark for aspiring musicians or young people who are trying to do something. And because it's so readily available, I'm finding that people are tending to just try and one up each other, perhaps, or feeling that they have to get to that level in order to be validated as being a great musician or a great drummer or a great whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So on one level, it's great because it's like having a library at the tip of your fingers, and you can find out anything you want. And then on another level, it's overwhelming, and sometimes we can be distracted from what our personal focus is. So going back to specifically what you were asking, like playing simply or playing complicated, the question always comes into my mind when I'm learning people's music, and it could be as simple as like a very straight up, rock and roll
Right.
beat, like a Tom Petty kind of thing, where it has to feel a certain way and sit a certain way, and it has nothing to do with technicality. It has nothing to do with accomplishment on the instrument. Really, it has to do with feel and the song. And then there's other compositions where people write stuff which is very complicated, and then the challenge there is, okay, I have to do something more technically involved and maybe even more challenging rhythmically, but I still have to attain the same thing with both of those things. So how can I achieve that without it becoming overwhelming and turning off that listener, the guy who doesn't know anything about this? I think that's huge, because I don't want it to come off sounding like a science experiment on stage, which is technically amazing, right? When you watch something happen, like when you watch a magic trick, it's phenomenal, right? You're like, oh, this is amazing. But you're at a magic show, so it's within context, it's great. But when you're going to watch something else, and then all of a sudden, it's, one of the elements is totally out of place, it just doesn't work. So I always go back to that thing of like, does it sound right? Does it feel right? Is it helping the song? Am I taking up too much space in this song? Like, am I drawing too much attention to me? Is this really about me? Is it about the band? Is it about the song? Is it about the concert? What's the trajectory of the concert, of the set list? Where are we peaking as a band? And then be open to, we're going here now. You know what I mean? So each band has its own things that have to happen in a sense, and they're sort of unwritten sometimes or unscripted.
Definitely.
But in the back of my mind, personally, I feel that I don't always want to have the attention of the listener. I mean, I want the listener to enjoy the whole thing and not just watch me as a drummer. I mean, that's terrible. That's one of the worst things in the world. And all the great drummers that I've grew up listening to, Canadian drummers who are internationally heavy, and American drummers and European drummers and stuff, all the phenomenal musicians that I've really been drawn to through the years were never really attention seekers. They were virtuosos, and they knew when to go there and when not to. So this whole YouTube 2-minute video or a 30-second video of how fast your right toe can go, it's a bit of a strange situation that we have to deal with these days. I think people are coming around now and starting to realize that, it's not always about that any longer. You know what I mean? Even though I think it's been around for another, let's say about 10 years or so, that we've been seeing all these videos coming up and virtuosic performances and all this stuff. But I think it's coming around, and people are starting to get tired of that and realizing it is about the music. It's not just about virtuosity.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if that really answers it specifically, but I think the question you were asking really is an important one to ask ourselves when we're playing every single time, including when you're playing in a cover band,
Right, and I think you did a great job answering that, because from what I'm extracting is really there's kind of three components you have to keep in mind when you're playing the drums, and from what I'm understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's, first of all, you're, like you said, you're not coming to a magic show, you're coming to a music show, and the first foundation of music is just, does it sound good? Is what you're playing going to sound good? So that's there. Then there's the other part you're saying is, does it feel good? Is this keeping the feel of, let's say, a bluesy song, or am I detracting from that?
Mm-hmm.
And then third is it's how you put it, it's like, do I fit here? Am I changing the focus of the music too much where I'm detracting from the overall message that the band or the song is trying to produce?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like straddling a fine line. It's like the high wire act. You know what I mean? You
Right.
have to have the skill and the training to walk that wire and keep your balance and stay calm while you're 25 stories high in the air. And you still have to you have to complete the task, right? There's people watching, and they want to be impressed by you, doing your tricks on that high wire. But one false move or one quick move that's going to take away from your focus, you're on the ground, and that's not going to
Exactly.
be so good. And trust me, I've fallen on the ground several times. I guess because of my age, I've had the experience of maybe pushing it too far. But I think that's really important to do, because sometimes you have to push to see how far it can go, and that's what I think becomes progression in the music. So sometimes it has to go there, and other times it doesn't have to go there. So it will feel wrong to push. So I think we live that fine line of keeping our balance, and I guess that's a life thing for me personally. It's not just drumming.
Yeah, I would say for me as well, and I definitely want to highlight what you said there is, I want listeners to know who are perhaps just in the midst of learning to perform with their instrument that, like you said, when you're on that high wire, you're going to fall many times, and
Hmm.
this podcast is obsessed with delivering the message that every single time you fall, you have two choices where you can, fall and accept that you screwed up and you're going to learn from that, or you fall, you accept you screwed up and you become discouraged from that. And
Mm.
one time and time again, the guests, yourself included, have stated that once they fall, um, these these people tend to use that as a learning experience and as
Hmm.
leverage in a sense for how they're going to, in your case, play at their next performance.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's important to note, and I think that life is full of that, and like we should accept change and growth, and I mean we have to remind ourselves that we're not virtuosos at everything and one thing. So I mean, it takes a lifetime, and it takes a community to grow, and we will have moments of shining, and we will have moments of being on the ground and trying to pick ourselves up. So when you see that whole, you know, the whole scope of things, it makes the whole thing a lot easier, in my opinion, rather than always just seeing the top of the hill. You know what I mean? And picturing yourself there all the time, because in reality, life's not like that, and we set ourselves up um, for the kind of sort of an emotional uh, challenge, major emotional challenge, if we think that we're always going to be there. And the other good thing about realizing that is it allows us to say, I'm okay with where my colleague is at, and the fact that I look up to this person and he is great at what he does, and I don't have a problem with that, because I'm glad to be a part of his life and to share greatness with this guy. And I think that animosity between musicians or
Mm.
agendas can kind of get in the way of just people being humans, and acceptance and understanding, and you know and again, that's just a life thing as well as a musical thing. People think music is specifically taking lessons, learning how to play great, and then go and do the gig. Yeah, but then you're dealing with human beings and you're playing it for human beings, so it all plays into the same thing, right?
Right, and you're touching on a phenomenon. You brought it up earlier. You mentioned how we're living in a generation right now where, like you said, I can go onto YouTube, I can type in drummer, and the first thing that's going to pop up is that guy who just won the Guinness World Record Book Challenge of fastest double stroke rolls on the snare drum or whatever, and some crazy amount of number in under a minute.
Yeah,
And
with a toothpick, right?
yeah,
Like
it's something insane
one,
like
yeah.
that.
And he didn't even use his hands. I mean, single strokes with a toothpick in his mouth. Like, he's worked it out that he can fluctuate his jaw back and forth. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, we're dealing with the circus act, right?
We are, and
We need
what
the circus. Don't kid yourself, but
for sure, yeah, and that kind of technical ability, what I've noticed, and I've made this mistake myself in the past, is it can be very intimidating and discouraging. And I've had a great teacher who speaks words similar to what you're saying right now, where he once told me that when you see a drummer who is that much better than you, you have two choices. You
uh-huh,
can A, watch him, be intimidated, be discouraged, and feel like you'll never reach that level, or
uh-huh,
B, you can watch him and be inspired and
uh-huh.
strive to reach that level. And that's been such a shift in perspective of me. Especially again coming from my background of not having this kind of musical education to deal with and feeling intimidated by that is, once you start to see anyone who's better than you as not an enemy or a competition necessarily, but as someone you can learn from. It's such a powerful experience.
It really is, and Jared, I have students that do that to me on a regular basis. So,
Wow.
um, I mean, I have to. I came to realize that I'm not the God's gift to the drumming community. I'm one of many great musicians in the world, and I'd be kidding myself if I didn't realize that. So it takes the pressure off, and it allows me to just play music and then find out who I am and how I want to play. And perhaps in doing that, it allows me to sound like an individual, and maybe at some point in my life, I'll be recognized for having done something. I'm not trying to change the world of drumming. I mean, how many generations are we in here? Fantastic drummers. I'm not sure that I'll ever really contribute anything new, really. I mean,
Right.
other than my take on it. And I think that just really changes it for all of us. I think I strive to be as best as I can personally. I work a lot, I practice a lot, and I try to understand and grow and learn and research and all that stuff. Most definitely. But I'm like I guess when I was in school studying with you know like-minded colleagues who became professionals as well, and some who've completely changed careers and stuff. The one thing that I valued the most was the fact that I could be part of their team as comrades, or as the camaraderie that you share with students when you learn. And I really tried my hardest to not allow myself to be competitive, first of all, or jealous. Or I definitely I experienced it from other people, but I did my best to not allow myself to feel that way. And I feel that really just what it does is it complicates everything, and it won't allow me to learn. It won't allow me to be open to learn. And I think being open enough to learn and accept something new, you have to realize that. You have to realize that you can't close yourself off or feel that your ego is in the way. I always say this to students at the beginning of the year when they get to know me. Is like, this is the way I like to teach, and we're going to share. I'm going to learn from you. You're going to learn from me. But the biggest thing is that you have to check your egos at the door. Otherwise, you won't learn. And
Right.
it takes a couple of lessons for them to start feeling comfortable enough to be able to do that. But I think it's so important. It's like the old gun saloon. Leave your guns at the door. The old Western saloon.
Right.
Come in, have a drink, share a chat. Leave the guns at the door. Tie your horses up outside. Let's do this together.
Yeah, you're here to learn, basically. Put everything
Yeah,
else aside.
yeah. And I mean, when it comes to playing music, you have to play at your best. You have to go with your instincts. You have to go for things. And simple or complicated, it makes no difference. You have to be invested emotionally, mentally, and just fully invested in what you're doing at that time. So everything else shouldn't play into it. It interferes actually more so than help. If your brain's thinking about all that stuff, it's when it comes time to play, just play. And don't think about all the technical things you did, or the guy and what the guy did, or what your teacher told you to do. You just got to play from the heart, and that's so important to me. So the ego is a very interesting thing, and I mean, I've really tried hard in my life to not allow that to get in my way. It's a tricky situation, right?
Yeah, and I would say, especially for you, because you're in the position where you're a professional drummer and you are essentially competing for gigs with other professional drummers. So I'm wondering, with that attitude that you have of keeping an open mind,
Hmm.
at the same time, you must come into gigs knowing that you have some sort of advantage over, let's say, another drummer who wants the same gig as you. So if it's not necessarily a technical advantage all the time, what are some other things that you bring as a drummer to the band that you feel other drummers could be doing better?
Um, that's interesting. I think I don't really think of it as the drums at that point. At this point, I guess I think I'm capable. I can play the drums. I don't think I have too many worries about that.
Right.
I think what it is just to be a solid person and a great guy, and to bring experience and perhaps an open mind, and also an openness to be able to learn what needs to be learned in order for things to work in that band. If I was playing in a band, for instance, like one band, and we were touring, and our focus was bar, and we were doing concerts all over the place, and that band, the focus of that particular band would be sort of um, predicted by what our goal was, whether it was the songs on the CD, or whether it was pre playing the songs before recording a new record or whatever. But as a freelancer, I almost have to really I have to assess each situation differently. So I think being that way really allows me to do that, and it allows the band leaders to perhaps feel comfortable enough to be able to say to me, hey, this is what I'm looking for, and here's where I'm at, what can you bring to the table? And then I guess it's just who I am. I mean, it's the same thing that you can bring to that situation. I'm not sure I have any advantages over anyone else other than maybe a couple of years of experience more than someone. And
Interesting.
and sometimes that's not even what they want. Sometimes they want somebody who has no experience. So I mean, I don't ever really think of like, you know, I'm not really interested in competition in music. I'm interested in making great music, and original music, and making sure that the people who are writing it are happy, and making sure that I feel that it's who I am with them in mind and with their music in mind. So I guess in the groups that I play in, I've been lucky enough that they've invited me in for that, because, I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty much it, really. That's the way I sort of view it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And as a freelance musician, so you've played for many bands and you come to these bands as the drummer. I'm wondering, is there sometimes a communication barrier where, the drums is a rhythmic instrument primarily, and although our instrument obviously produces notes, it's
Hmm.
not necessarily, noted what notes it's producing. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
important. So one of the issues I've had when I play as a freelance as well when I'm being invited to certain bands is I'll get, let's say, a bass player who wants me to play something that by his description is either A, impossible, or B, makes zero sense.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that kind of communication barrier that comes when that's what's happening is a melodic instrument trying to speak to a rhythmic instrument in the wrong language? How do you deal with that kind of communication issue?
Well, sometimes the communication is, hey, can you play like this kind of a group? And you're sitting there going, uh, right? And sometimes the communication is very specific and clear, and you're sitting there saying what you said. It's almost impossible to play this. But here's the challenge. Um, are you personally willing to figure out what this person's asking you? Are you listening to their question to understand them? Are you listening to them to pull something out of what they're saying that makes you feel comfortable?
Right.
So it's a balance. I mean, I know guys, colleagues of mine and friends that are phenomenal musicians in New York, working on cutting edge projects, and very complicated, very, very interesting music, and they shed it. They make a choice to shed it and to grow and to learn how to do this, because it's like the same thing as opening up a book, like syncopation for your first time in your life. What the hell is this? I've never seen this before. It's a funny cover, but my teacher said I needed to buy it, so I bought it, and I don't know how to read yet. Holy cow, I'm scared. So you ask yourself, as a kid, maybe you don't even ask yourself, am I ready for this? You just do it, right?
Right.
And you accept the challenge. So my point being that if you're up for learning how to think alternatively, possibly. So I've never done this before. This bass player is telling me to do something I don't even understand. Am I willing to put in the time to figure out what he's talking about? And do I really care about what he wants to do? And if you are, the interesting thing is you'll come up with something that works for you and for him. I think, in my experience, I found that. And then if you don't have the time to, and he still wants you to be a part of it, and and everything's good, you can try and compromise or try and like suggest things back and forth. I mean, that sometimes is a great way, and I guess playing it more than talking about it is where you're going to get your answer more so, because when we put it into verbal, it's a language unto itself. So if you talk about it, it's great, but at a certain point, you're going to have to play it, and it's going to have to be, yes, that's what I was thinking, right? Unless you're extremely specific and very concise with what you want to say, and very articulate with your musical knowledge. It 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 can become more maybe easier, perhaps, or maybe more complicated, depending on how you look at it. Um, I guess I should say that having gone to college and university and all that stuff, I did study other instruments, and I do understand theory and all that. So on that level, I mean, I've taken it upon myself in music school to learn about harmony, melody, all the elements of music, and I've gone beyond that to try and understand what soloists have to deal with if it's in a jazz context, or like chord progressions and analysis and all that stuff. That stuff was super important to me as a student and also as a musician. And to me, the more I know about that stuff, at the same time knowing a lot about the rhythmic stuff. So I specified in my rhythmic studies and drumming and percussion and all that stuff. But I have knowledge of all that other stuff. I'm able to kind of speak the same language. So in a sense, we might get to it a little quicker. So perhaps that's something I bring to the table too, right? Is that I do understand that side of things. And I might not be as proficient as like the ultimate harmonic player, like a guitar player, piano player, or whatever, or anybody who's really specifically worked on harmony. I do have a good working knowledge of it, and I feel comfortable with it. So if it's playing a pop tune and knowing where the turnaround is, or where the bridge is, and understanding those motions, that's really important. Yeah, understanding the form on that level. Or if it's a complicated song, like you were talking about at that performance that you may have walked into, it's understanding the harmony so that I have the freedom to know where I am while the song's going on as a musician. And then, having worked on playing the drums that many years, I feel comfortable playing the drums on something that might be a complicated song, So maybe it's that knowledge, and I don't know. That's a good question. You should ask some of the people who hire me.
No, that was a good answer, and it reminds me of what I had a drum teacher tell me once, where he told me any good drummer knows the basics of a melodic instrument, because to him he believed, just like you said, melodic instruments are speaking a certain language that we as musicians playing in a band with those instruments need to be able to at the very least understand and communicate with on a basic level. So I'm wondering, do you agree with that saying? Do you think a good drummer should at least have some basic foundation in harmony, melody, or even let's say a little bit of the instrument technically as well?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think it's super, super important. I think it's beyond important. Even if you're going to play Back in Black by AC/DC, or if you're going to play something really straightforward, if you know about other instruments, other harmony, if you even have some working knowledge of playing those instruments or of writing songs, I mean, what you bring to the table is deeper. It's huge. I think it's super important. Yeah, I agree with that statement.
Yeah, and I agree with it as well, and that's because I've experienced the difference personally. I almost felt like in the early days when I started playing with different bands, there wasn't just a lack of communication, but there was a looking down on me as just the drummer,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
couldn't be part of these conversations, couldn't possibly
yeah.
have any clue of what I was talking about, because, it comes back to the old drumming jokes, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, which I mean are reversible at any given point. So I don't. I mean, you got to laugh those things off for sure.
definitely.
But yeah, I think it's super important. And I mean, I guess my focus. I didn't start as a drummer, so I always wanted to be a drummer, but I didn't start as a drummer. And I had to kind of take the long road to get to the drums. But I'm really grateful to have had that experience in my life because it really opened up a lot of different things for me. And I mean, I also have the perspective and interest in production. So I think that, knowing about music and understanding it, not just as a drummer, because that's really just very small in a sense. It's like a very particular thing. Knowing music as a whole is really the key as a musician, and proficiency on the instrument you're going to play on is really important too. Uh,
Right.
Even if it's to play in a band that you're supposed to look like you can't play your instrument, like they have to have some sort of
Mhm.
proficiency on that so you can be in that band. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even if it looks like the video on whatever station is a bunch of hackers, that's the vibe that they're going for. But really, they know how to play their instruments, right?
Yeah, they know how to play it within whatever context that kind of music calls
Exactly.
for.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'd be surprised that a lot of those guys went to school for music and are phenomenal musicians. They're playing in a successful band that's making them money, or that they have a career with, or that they love, and that music does not call for virtuosic, technical ability. It calls for sloppy, thrashy playing, and an attitude that complements that. So that's all about the gig and the music. Again, it goes back to what we talked about before. I think that's a huge thing in what we do, is always remembering what we're doing and who we're doing it for. And it's not just for us, right? Actually, if it is for us, then we don't need to do it publicly or online. If it's just for us, right?
Yeah, it's that open-mindedness once again, and
I think.
the impression I'm getting is even beyond an open-mindedness to the kind of music you're playing. It kind of, to become a good musician, it seems to me like it requires an open-mindedness into who you are as well. So, just hearing you talk, and it's very similar to what Nick Ruffini was saying, is that he sees himself as far more than just a drummer. And,
Mhm.
it's clear that you feel the same way, where you have a lot of experience with other instruments and you have experience as a producer. So it's like, yeah, you're a drummer, but also I've played these instruments and I've produced music and I can draw on this wealth of experience as well. So I'm really far more than just a drummer, because like you said, if you choose to define yourself by just one of those things, you risk limiting yourself almost.
Yeah, and like I did say this a bit earlier, it's great when somebody specifically does that one thing, right? Because we have fantastic people who are specialists, right? They
Right.
do things, they're virtuosic in that one thing. And they have success, perhaps, if they've got it all sorted out, and you know, perhaps they have success in that, which is fantastic. We need that. Personally, I feel that I like many things, and I feel like I want to keep that alive. I don't want to just be, you know, with my head down doing that one particular thing for the rest of my life. I mean, change is huge for all of us, and although there are things that are in the forefront that I love, drumming, for
Yeah.
instance, I mean, I have dedicated a huge amount of my life to that, and I don't feel like I'm subpar to the drumming community in comparison to other international, well-recognized musicians. I don't feel that way. It, you know, I feel comfortable with where I'm at, and I think that as a Canadian, there's a whole different thing going on too, because um, I think the industry is a little smaller here,
Mm,
um, and perhaps the focus is not so much on Canadian artists as much as we've known. I mean, this is no secret,
right.
but the musicianship and the virtuosity and the musicality and all those great things, I mean, it's equally as great as anywhere else in the world. And whether we choose to celebrate it may not be our fault, but it may just be that it hasn't happened yet on that same level because of the numbers and because of the infrastructure of the industry.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
see what you're saying there.
you see what I'm saying? So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's fantastic. What you're doing is amazing because you're actually exposing the world to several things. And I think as a student, I've studied with several fantastic musicians, and I've gone to hear like thousands and thousands of performances of colleagues and people that would just you bump into on the street here in Toronto, where I choose to live, and equally in a greater center like New York or Los Angeles or wherever, Europe, in England or whatever. Um, I think that it's just really important to realize that we're surrounded by the same greatness that comes out commercially. That we see these artists every day, and these teachers that I had, or these mentors, so to speak, were right under my nose while all those publications were pumping up all those other guys. And I'm thinking to myself, hang on a second. This guy who lives down the street from me, or next door to me, is, one of the most fantastic musicians in the world, but people don't know it yet. So do I choose to play the game of the popular society, or do I choose to make my own decision and realize that? And so that's why I feel comfortable with that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So I'm wondering then, as someone with as much experience as yourself, what are some things that drummers who have achieved a similar level of comfortability in their skill and their ability to play, what are some other skills that have perhaps maybe not nothing to do with drumming, but very little to do with drumming that they can use to help so that they don't, let's say they don't want it. Not that there's anything wrong with this ending up like the guy you saw on your street who is amazing but no one hears about. What can they do to, if they are after that level of exposure, what can they do to pursue that has nothing to do with their drumming?
Um, okay, yeah, I think the guy that lives on the street has exposure.
Right, right.
So just so that we don't fall into the ditch here, I think it's just a different thing when you compare the icons of the industry and who, like, people that are massive and world recognized in the world. I mean, we all have them no matter where we live, right? So I don't mean to diminish anyone by any means. I think what I'm trying to say is it would be great to celebrate these people more,
Mm,
and it would be great if it was more of a worldwide celebration rather than a local one, um, which is happening. I think it's slowly happening, and it might take a few generations to be at par, but I think it's good. I think that just being outside of being a great musician and working at your craft and stuff, I think you have to sort of be able to talk to people and get out into the world and not be afraid to go and meet people and network and make yourself known. And I don't mean that you have to sort of go out there and say, look at me, and put up all these videos and stuff. And I mean, that definitely is one of the ways that people have gotten success is,
definitely.
put up tons of videos on YouTube. In this day and age, that's the way that it's been happening for some folks. But I think it really comes down to understanding, like, when I understand that my colleague who lives on my street is phenomenal, and I validate what he does, and I talk to people about who he is and what he does, and when he plays the way that he does, and when there's a community of people like-minded, and when we have that sort of um, validity within ourselves, it sort of gives strength to the whole thing, and then people start looking that way, and they start saying, "Hey, what's going on over here? Um, Maybe we should check this out." You know what I mean? So I think it's just being really great at what you do, being a great person. That's huge. Being an amazing personality, working on that as much as working on your instrument is huge. Having good personality skills and the personal skills and I think people really appreciate that on any level. And I mean, this crosses over into the classroom and crosses over into the studio experience or into the live performance, or that's so huge. I mean, some of the reason why you sit and scratch your head why some people don't ever really go further is because there's an issue personally, and it just doesn't work sometimes. That doesn't mean that everybody that I'm just saying that sometimes plays a role in why things don't go beyond a certain point.
For
I think
sure.
other things, I mean, there are very proactive networkers out there who really go out there and push their stuff. And I think what it comes down to is just being happy with who you are and confident with what you do, and being honest and not egotistical about it, but being able to say, I feel confident in what I'm doing because this is what I've invested my life into, and I'm happy to share this with you. And generally, people see the sincerity and accept it, or they recognize it.
Yeah, I agree completely. You can tell right away when someone's being honest and comfortable in their own skin, even beyond the realm of drumming. I would say on top of that, though, if you are a musician or a drummer in particular who is after a
Hmm.
certain level of fame, it's like you said before, you definitely have to be willing to put yourself out there beyond just your music. And it reminds
Yeah.
me of a book I was reading, the biography of Brett Wilson, who I don't know if you've heard of him. He was on Dragon's Den. He was one of the dragons.
Yeah.
So for the Americans listening, that's just the Canadian version of Shark
Yeah.
Tank.
Yeah.
And what he said is, beyond what you want to do in your life, if you're someone who's after a certain level of exposure or fame, then you're forced to learn the skill of marketing.
Yes.
If you want to achieve that level. So it's like, yeah, and big part of that is what you said, is just be willing to put yourself out there, attend these networking events, send these people these emails, call these people, do what you have to do, and don't just rely on your skill alone.
Yeah, I think for me personally, that's the one thing that I want to insist on,
Right?
because I know amazing networkers who are like let's just say that the scale is unbalanced. So the business networking abilities may outweigh their musical abilities,
Gotcha. Yeah.
or the opposite, right? I've seen that as well, where they're phenomenal musicians, but they just don't have that will or knack or interest in the other side. So either they hire somebody or they just don't do it at all. You got to be comfortable with it, and I think that's pretty much what it is. You got to be comfortable with that. Some people have gone as far as to become a brand, themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is great because they become iconic, and those are the people who end up getting that high level of exposure, which is understandable because they've committed to that. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think I know that a lot of folks that aren't comfortable with that will hire somebody to do it for them, and that happens, with every professional, really. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I think that at a certain point, if you're going to travel the world and be doing this, there has to be some of that. Otherwise, no one's going to know who you are or what you do, right? So it's all up to your comfort level. So I think the marketing skills are very important, but they shouldn't outweigh the ability skills. And I think that that's a big part of the whole well-rounded thing.
For sure, it's that delicate balance we keep bringing up. And now I'm wondering if we take it to the opposite side of the spectrum and we have, let's say, someone who is confident in the realm of networking, like you said, but perhaps they lack that comfortability with their actual playing skill. To
Yeah.
you, someone who's accomplished such a high level of skill, is there like a minimum amount of practice that you feel is necessary to achieve? And if it's not practice, is there other things for drumming specifically in this case that we can do to reach that level of comfortability?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. And I think I'm not trying to discourage anybody who is perhaps trying to get better. Actually, I want to encourage that. It's more words of, let's make sure that our balance is in check. Um, I think that specifically to the drums, for instance, as you've asked, um, I think that if you can get to it every day, and if you're thinking about it every day, um, I think that that is a great start. So, as far as an amount of time, that all depends on the individual, and that's
Mm,
kind of why you go to see a specialist. Like that's why you check in with the drum teacher or
right,
the
right.
you know what I mean?
Like a
Be-
mentor, yeah.
exactly. The reason to check in is so that that person can say, okay, based off of the amount of work that you've done, you're successful in achieving these things, or you need to spend a little bit more work. So at that point, that's up to the person themselves who's trying to get better to assess. And that's huge. I mean, I think for me, teaching is not only teaching content, it's teaching the student how to learn and how to how to organize their time and how to say, okay, I need to spend 10 minutes on this because I know how to do it, and I'm going to warm up with this specific thing, and then I need to focus on this more because I can't do it at all. But I also have to remember that if I only focus on that, I'm not going to be able to do this other thing because I won't have time for it today. So the thing that I like to say is that if you have an hour to practice and only an hour, then what you should do is have a rubric of how you're going to break up your time.
Mm,
And if you're not going to talk about minutes, maybe percentages, or even just like You can say, this is great for a warm up. This will last me 5 minutes, and this will last me another 7 minutes. And then if I get this concept in the first 15 minutes, I can move on to this one and have, like, over the course of a month, several things that I might want to work on. And within that month, you're going to start seeing where things start happening. It takes perhaps longer than a month sometimes, and the opposite is true too. Things may come quickly, but consistency doesn't come with, like, oh, I did it today and it worked, so I don't have to work on it anymore. I think consistency comes from having done it every single day. And if I have 5 hours today, I can be more specific with how deep I want to get into certain concepts. So I generally, when I practice, and I still do as much as I can, um, I try to have a clear idea of what it is I want to work on. I don't go to the drums and just play the drums. I treat that as a session where I'm playing the drums. So practice time is to focus on the things that I want to work on, and then playing the drums is a different time, right?
Right. And
So
that's sorry to interrupt. I was gonna say that's
yeah,
so difficult for
yeah,
many drummers, especially to understand, just jamming. Yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of its own practice in its own way, but it's so different than, spending 30 minutes working with the metronome or a book per se.
Yeah, but the thing is you want to do that too, because that's
Right.
why we want to have fun playing the drums. So the challenge is, and it's personal, right? Everybody has their own challenge, and that is, today I have a lot of concentration power, and my brain is very focused. I think I can do this, and I'm going to go for 2 hours working on these 7 things, these 7 items that I have on my schedule for this month, whatever it is. And then you wake up tomorrow and your brain is kind of fried from being tired from work or whatever, and you just actually just want to play along to some records or whatever.
Mm,
Um, my thing is always like, okay, let me see if I can get my head into focus first and go over the stuff that I want to learn. If I can get to it, if I have an hour to get to it, I'll do that, and I'll say to myself, okay, I'm going to try and get through all the items, but I'm going to condense it into that 1 hour. But I'm going to leave myself perhaps 15 minutes to play along to these tunes that I want to have fun with. I try to separate having fun at the drums with working on things on the drums, because it doesn't mean that I don't do that. It means that I have to be clear with myself. If I want to learn specific things, I can't just show up on the drum set and play along to my favorite songs and then expect to know what it was that I was hoping to get together. Right, that concept that I wanted to really learn, that I've been pushing off
right.
because I really don't want to challenge myself. So it's like that balancing act. Okay, here's the challenge and here's the fun. So as a reward, I'll play to stuff afterwards, or maybe I'll play to it before and then I'll go, oh, there goes my 15 minutes. Time to focus in. And I put myself through the ringer, and that's part of the consistency of a drummer. Um, some people have a different approach where they just say, yeah, man, let's just play the tune. And then you just sit at the drums and the focus is, I just got to make this thing groove. And that's what it is. Boom. And that's what you do. That's the agenda. And it's not about learning about heavy duty rhythmic concepts or improving. It's just like, let's play this pop tune. And tomorrow I got to go in the studio and play some more. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so many people have made a career doing that and are successful and are great at that. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not, it's non-academic. It's actually fantastic. It's beautiful. So they're both valid, but the question is, what do I want to achieve? Do I want to
Yeah.
get all this stuff together, or do I want to just play tunes? And if that's the case, then that's what you need to do. That's what your practice is.
Yeah, and that's this topic to me is something I've struggled with for especially for the year I've been for the past year when I've been a music student is I've kind of had a bit of an identity crisis where I know how much I love the drums and I know how much I love learning with them, but because of the other things I want to pursue in life, I had this point where I kind of went, I'm only practicing sometimes minimum 30 minutes to an hour a day, and sometimes my practice is me just having fun as opposed to me sitting down and doing the grinding part of my work. And I had to ask myself, you know, do I have it in me? Is it because that is a side effect of me not putting in the grind work going to be that I can't become this great drummer I want to be. And it's really interesting to hear you say how it kind of depends on what you're after personally. And that's what I've come to realize is, yeah, I do want to learn these extremely technical skills that I know will increase my playing ability in other ways. But at the same time, I know right now in my life, it's not the time to do this for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And I've had to like it was very powerful for me and a confidence building thing when I just became comfortable with and kind of like what you said, I had to know exactly what I was after with my practice. Am I practicing just to sound a little better for tomorrow's gig, or am I practicing to get, let's say, my double stroke rolls that much faster? And once
Exactly.
I could set my priorities straight, I was able to become a lot more confident in myself as a musician.
I agree, and they're both valid, right? Like this is what I'm saying is that if your goal is to be the fastest double stroke player in the world, then that's what you're going to focus on, and then you're going to focus all your exercises around that goal. If your goal is to play that repertoire of music as best as you can and get comfortable and memorize it, and that's what you practice, then that's equally as valid, right? Because it is your own agenda, and I think that um, you have to decide that for yourself. If you spend your whole day watching videos of all these guys that are doing amazing things, and that's your goal, then you're going to have to at some point face those realities. And if you don't sort of address some of those things, that reality might not happen as quickly. Or at least for me, at least, you know what I'm saying? Because like,
Right.
maybe I'm not as gifted as someone who's born with that natural ability. And um, I think that it's very important to understand those elements, and it really comes down to what your goals are and how comfortable are you with what you're doing at that given time, and do you want to be that virtuosic clinician, or do you want to be the guy who's playing these gigs, or do you want to be the guy who, I mean, there's so many different roles that we all can play, that they're all valid, in my opinion. Um,
Right.
and we all have a place in the world. I think it really comes down to defining ourselves and trying our best to stay close to what we believe is true, and being open-minded again, and not saying that I'm better than you are because this is what I do and what you do is different than what I do, so that it, it's not as valid. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I think that kind of falls into all the issues we're having socially and in the world. Aside from aside from playing the drums, you know what I mean. This is the stuff that happens even on political
Exactly.
levels or social levels. Very important things to think about. Environmental levels, like all that stuff is so huge, right?
Right. And
Uh,
and I definitely would want to stress for listeners that what Anthony's talking about, this idea of knowing yourself and what you want, let's say in the drums in particular in this case, is what I've come to realize, it's an ever-changing thing, and it's not something you're going to know right away. There was a time where I thought I wanted to be that guy who practiced 6 hours a day, and I actually remember telling people when I was younger, I want to be the best drummer in the world. I
mhm.
that mindset, it's just not in me anymore, and I'm happy. Yeah, I know that's just not
Yeah.
who I am, and
Well,
there's so much power in that.
yeah, there definitely is, and there's also power in realizing this: there is no best drum set player in the world.
Mm,
Like, I don't know if you knew that or not. I'm sure you did. I'm kind of being facetious here, but I mean, to the listeners, there really is no best drum set player in the world, because who's the one to decide? And um, I'm not sure that that's a possibility.
it's all
I,
perspective, right?
it is, and it's taste, and it's people's tastes and what they like, and that changes, because if I ask somebody in India, it's not going to be the same as if I ask somebody in Scarborough, or in the um, wherever, and it's just not it's not the same thing. So once you realize again that there is no trophy at the end of this, it's really all about you know being happy and playing great music with great people and making things work, and being the best that you can, and trying to chase what it is that you want to do. And you're the one setting your own goals, and the comparison thing is not really going to help you, other than maybe inspire you, as we talked about
Right.
earlier, rather than it being a oh, he's better than me situation. It should be more like, oh, that's great, this guy's doing this, and he's really specific about that, and he's really great. But here's what I like to do, and I don't feel so bad that I don't do the same thing. I'm just going to keep doing what I need to do and be strong about it and have an open mind. And I think that's a big part of it, you know.
Yeah, and that's just a beautiful way to live life in general, where, so many people have this, I don't want to say natural, because I don't think this is a natural human reaction. I think it's more of a cultural ingrained thing. But at least in North American society, when we see someone who has achieved a level of success that we feel jealous of on whatever level, we
Mhm.
tend to become haters. And I've made a change in my life where when I see these people, just like we talked about before, I try to be inspired by them, but also, you know, um, respect them for that and,
Yeah, yeah.
admire them even at a certain level.
Yeah, I think at a certain level we have to appreciate it because now they've made it easier for us to understand what we can accomplish as a human being if we want to.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
You know, because otherwise it just becomes that whole idea of one upping each other. It's very, as you know, it's very destructive, and it doesn't help anyone, including ourselves. So if we're thinking about ourselves and we're being destructive to everyone around us, all it does is it just destroys us and the perception of us to others. So it's a counterintuitive way to think of it. It's like if I celebrate this person's greatness, it allows me to understand where I can go or the possibilities of human beings, and I think it's much better to celebrate that than to criticize it or to destroy it. I think it's a tricky situation because it's a small industry and everybody wants a piece of the
Mm,
pie and everybody wants to be on the cover and everybody wants to be great and everybody wants to be liked and all that. But at what costs? And you got to ask yourself, am I comfortable with that if I do that? And some people are, and that's totally valid, and some people aren't, and they'll just please everybody, and that's their identity. You got to find it for yourself again. I feel that, that's a huge thing. It's discovery, self-discovery. You know what I mean?
definitely. And I just want to stress too, I think there is a time and place, and I have a feeling you'd agree, where, yeah, sometimes it's like you said, we're in a small industry where everyone wants a piece of the pie, and that calls for a level of competition. However, that level of competition doesn't necessarily mean you have to become a hater of the people you're in competition with.
Yeah.
That won't get you far in my experience.
Well, sometimes it might cause a cool sort of public relations campaign, and it might turn into some cool, articles
That's
on the
true.
front of the New Yorker or something like that. But I mean, and that all depends on the uh, I was going to say genre, but not genre, but the idiom that you're involved with. You know what I mean? Like what platform you're in, and if you're a part of that sort of culture or not. And so that can be kind of fun too. And some of it is very tongue in cheek. There's some great satirical things going on in our world, which, when you realize that's what they are, you can appreciate them for what they are, right?
Mm.
And so that's all. There's a place for that too. But to be destructive and negative is it's tricky because it doesn't help anyone. It causes more tension within ourselves, and it doesn't really. I'm not saying peace and love, although I am. I do have to say that you have to, you got to work on it for yourself, and people do need to know that, you know, maybe there are things you don't really, you're not interested in, for instance, rather than, the whole thing of I hate and I love is very important because we have to understand the yin and yang stuff, the black and white. I mean,
Right.
that all exists at the same time. But I don't really like to have that dark thing hovering over my head. You know what I mean? I'd rather not choose that way of living.
I agree. You got to find that middle ground where you acknowledge the dark part is there, but you don't let it overpower you. And it's definitely, it seems to be, unfortunately, I've come across a lot of people who you meet them, and I guess because I've been through depression myself, I can just tell this guy is clearly depressed right now, and it's a scary thing to be in because it's very hard to bounce back from.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing is we have to realize that not everybody is always up all the time,
Not
and
at all.
and that's life. I mean, and it goes back to that thing. Not everybody's always going to be at the top of that mountain. Remember, we talked about that,
Right.
and when you realize that. life has ups and downs, and when you're on, like I've always remembered, like when you're at the bottom, and that gives you the time to be out of the focus to work on something that you really want to do, and you're not in the highlight where everybody's trying to chop you down, right? So that's a bit of time off for you to kind of get it together and to grow. And I mean, we're human beings. We all have these issues. You know, we all have several things we're dealing with at different times, and I think the whole that it's not over till it's over thing is pretty important to remember too. Because today I might not be where I want to be, but tomorrow I might actually be further ahead than I was yesterday, and that's so important because it gives us hope and it helps us to accept our surroundings and the people around us. And again, it gives us a new light on people who are in the highlight, receiving that sort of accolade. If we see it from that perspective, it allows us to see what's possible. And it's, again, something very important for me. I stress that. It's the same thing as, like, okay, I can't get my double strokes together today. I don't get it. Rather than getting frustrated with it, like, learn patience. Learn about being compassionate and allow yourself the time to learn it. People want to learn now.
Oh,
that
yeah.
that 2 second video I saw was unbelievable. I got to do it now, and I mean it's accelerated how people learn. Right? You know, people learn quickly
Yeah.
quicker. They learn quickly, but it also puts a lot of pressure on people. And I mean, realistically, if you slow something down for a minute and learn it, and then speed it up after that minute, you're going to be able to do it a lot quicker than if you just try and do it fast for an hour and a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I love the way you're putting it, just stressing this patience, and also, again, a common theme that I've tried to prove with all the guests I've brought on is this acknowledgement that not everyone's going to be at the top of the mountain, as you said, and there are going to be periods in your life where you're at the bottom and you're feeling depressed. And I always try to stress that. And some people call me crazy for this, and it's just, in my experience, that depression is actually a very good thing. It's a very powerful thing for a person. And I don't think it's any coincidence that every single guest that's been on here has experienced some form of depression or failure that they've learned from and grown from.
Yeah, I think that's super important to realize. I think what you have to do is be sure, like, have a great community around you, or like have people around that can recognize that and can help if you need the help. Um, but it is normal, right? That's the way the human brain is. I mean, we're not perfect. We
Exactly.
aren't. Like, I mean, sorry to say that. We aren't. I'm a perfect example of that. I lead by example on that one. So when it's like from day one to whenever we're here for, that's the challenge: is learning and growing and getting better and getting it together and learning from our mistakes and learning from others and being open enough to realize that, I mean, this is an ideal sort of idealistic perspective, but
Definitely.
I mean, that's the reason why there's religion and meditation and practicing. And I mean, I kind of lumped all that stuff into the same thing because that's kind of what you're trying to do. You're trying to get to who you are,
Exactly. And
you
it's a
know?
skill. It's something that's got to be practiced. It's not an instant result like you were saying. It's not going to happen in 2 days or 2 seconds or 2 minutes. It's going to take
No.
minimum 2 years, in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And then from that point forward, you're just getting started. So,
Exactly.
I mean, I think that one of the guys that I studied with who's really prolific teacher, the thing was he taught once a month. And it was great because it gave us time to really sink our teeth into the stuff and experience a month's worth of ups and downs before you actually moved off of things, you
That's
know,
really interesting. Yeah.
rather than a week to week thing, which is very important. But I even see the progression with students that I teach is that it takes people longer than they want sometimes to really get it. I mean, it takes me years to get concepts sometimes. I'll be chipping away at it forever. I mean, if you think about great architects or artists or, all that stuff, it takes them years to make a carving, to design something that's phenomenal. It might take them a lifetime to make one beautiful painting. I mean, and that's what they're known for the rest of their life, right? If we look back at all the great people in history, I think that it's really difficult to produce phenomenal stuff constantly, right? It's
Of
it's a
course.
con.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as a constant work in progress, and you'll have greatness along the way. And I
Right.
mean, that's why it's so valid and important, really important for us to realize that when you're at your cousin's wedding and there's some guy up on that stage playing wedding band tunes, it's important to understand why that guy has something to offer you, whether you're pro or not.
Mm,
And like it's to look at any given situation or to walk into a club where you have to pay a $25 cover charge to see your hero play. He has just as much to offer you as that guy playing the wedding. I mean, it's all up to you on what you want to learn. Now, there's people who like the lesson might not be they're teaching you how to play something. They may be teaching you what not to do, but there's always something there. You know what I'm saying?
right. Yeah, I totally know what you're saying.
So,
Um, I'm sorry to interrupt. We
no,
are
no, go ahead.
we are running out of time here, but
Yeah,
there's a couple questions I do want to ask you, Anthony.
go for it.
And when you bring up these students that you
Yeah.
have, we had Bass Rutten on the podcast the other week, and he's, in case you don't know him, he's former UFC heavyweight champion and a
Mm.
great trainer to many fighters. And I asked him, I said, do you ever get a student who maybe not right away, but as time goes on, you can just tell right away this just isn't meant for him or her. Like it's not going to work. And I'm wondering when it comes to your students and specifically drumming, are there any key indicators that make you go, this person may want to learn it, but he or she is just not, it's not going to happen?
Hmm. I never say it's not going to happen because I don't know that, but
Mm,
what they know it and they make up their mind. Um, that sounds funny, but anyways, I'll just start talking a little bit about being a student myself,
sure.
having gone through college, university, and stuff like that, and seeing my colleagues. Um, I'm trying to think about the drop off rate of students, like I mean graduate rates from year one to graduating year.
Right.
So you get the entry level of maybe 250 people come to that school, and then year two it dwindles, and three and four, and then there's like maybe 50 graduates or something like that.
Mm,
I think students are partially trying to find their way. They're trying to figure out what it is that they want to do. I think that it's okay to change your mind. I think it's okay to become, rather than a drummer, maybe a drum maker, or maybe a drum um, programmer, or a guy who's, I mean, you know what I mean? Maybe I'll get into the
right.
industry of marketing drummers or marketing drum products. Or so I'm still in that sort of field.
Yeah.
And then you get the other guys who take a left turn and turn into business people or lawyers, or they just totally don't do music anymore. You know what I mean? And they did it and they enjoyed it and they moved on from it. In the drum studio specifically, I've seen guys go through like full training or whatever you want to call it, years graduating from a university or college, and then never play again. And um, I'm never going to be the guy to tell them unless it's grueling for them and they hate it and they're totally. I'll ask them. And I'll help them to realize that they don't really want to do it. I mean, I've had students enroll in a drumming course and they think it'll be fun, and then by the time they're done 5 weeks of lessons and they realize, oh no, I have to do another whatever it is, another half, 3/4 of a year. I still have to take these lessons with this guy who's really intense about the music and learning drums, because they start realizing this isn't for me, right?
Right.
So they make that choice for themselves, but I definitely won't come down on anybody, because on the opposite side of thing, I've seen students come in with zero knowledge and become some of the best drummers that have graduated in the school, and
Wow.
become and professionals. And I mean, a lot of the guys that I've taught have done it and are pros and are doing it. You know what I mean? And they're great musicians, and I respect them highly, as colleagues, not as a student, as a colleague. And I don't think I want to be in the position to tell somebody, don't play the drums because you suck. Because maybe next year you won't. If you really want to play the drums, you will.
Right.
And it comes down to how much you want something. How badly do you want it? That's the end game. It's how much more do you want it than the guy beside you.
Right.
It's
And
yeah.
so I was just going to say, amongst these students that you've seen come with maybe not nothing, but very minimal level of skill or
Yeah,
talent, what is the and to eventually reach such a high level, like you said, is
yeah,
there any common, personality traits or motivators that these students have shared?
yeah. That's a great question. There's one thing that's really awesome that I think is really good is that number one is they're really driven, their will, right? They
Right.
really want to learn. That's number one. And number two, they have no preconception or ego because they haven't done it before. So they just want to
Mm,
learn and they focus and they do it. So it goes back to that check the ego at the door thing, right? It's like if
right.
you really want to do something and you set your mind to it and you don't let all these other things get in the way of your goal, you'll do it. And if you keep persisting and stay honest and be a good person about it, it'll happen. Um, I think that if you're malicious about it, you'll probably burn some bridges along the way. You might even get some pushback. You might even have, you'll start questioning what you're doing, how much you like it, and then it's just not something you want to do anymore. So I think the common thing amongst these students is that they don't have an ego and they want to learn, and they're focused. And a lot of the times it's the underdog that comes out swinging. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's huge. That's huge for me. That's really big. I think I felt that way myself as a student. I always felt put myself in a situation where I was the underdog or not the best guy in the room, or and that's not easy. I mean, sorry, that's not difficult for me to do. It's a pretty easy thing. I mean, I feel that that's the key element is the will and the drive. You know what I mean? And to be a great person along the way. Because it just keeps it alive. It keeps that spark going. You wonder why the guy's doing the same thing for 50 years and it still sounds like he's doing it for the first time as a kid. Good,
Yeah.
and that's it. It's that passion and that openness and the will and you know.
Yeah, and I think that's such a empowering way to go about your life. Just if people, if everyone, whether you want to learn the drums or whether you want to learn Mandarin or you want to learn
Yep.
something else, if you approach the learning process as exactly like you said, something that you, first of all, you genuinely want to do it, so you're going to put in the time, and two, you check your ego at the door, any preconceived notions of where you should or shouldn't be. At that specific moment of your study, have realistic expectations almost.
Hmm.
It's such a great way to go about learning anything.
Yeah, it is, and I think the culture of learning under somebody is really. I mean, it's more of more of a thing in India, for instance, where you have a guru and you're studying with the
Mm,
guru and you do everything, and then you come out as a virtuoso or whatever, or you just have tons of knowledge. That concept is a little less in our culture. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think that it's important to have a mentor and to keep your goal in mind, but also to be willing to listen to somebody who has more experience and understand that they've already done it. And like I said earlier, I'm not sure how much I'm going to change in my lifetime, but I may be able to contribute something on the grand scheme of things. But I don't know how much I'm going to be able to change in my lifetime because it's been 100 years of this of history of the drums, right? Or more.
right.
So I mean, I'm going to add my slant to it, but I don't know what I'll change on it. I mean, I don't know if that's actually if maybe some listeners might or might not agree. They might think, well, there's definitely guys that have changed the drumming throughout the years. I'm not saying that there aren't. I'm saying that I'm not taking that headspace that I want to change the world. I
Right.
will hopefully have done something to contribute by the end of my lifetime. And the focus isn't I'm going to change the world.
Right, and it's
You know what I
just
mean?
it's personal to you, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that at all. If anything, that's the right way to think about stuff. Um, I don't want to hold you for any longer, Anthony. I just want to thank you again so much for being a part of this. I can't tell you how much it's a relief to finally have got the chance to ask you these questions. I've been waiting forever since the
Ah,
Cuban Ensemble.
that's funny. I really appreciate your patience. I'm sorry I was away when we were trying to get this thing rolling, but I'm glad to be back and able to do it. And it was a pleasure, man. I'm really, really happy that you're doing this, and I wish you all the best. And I look forward to doing more,
Oh,
and
thank you
staying,
so much,
staying in
man. Yeah.
touch. Yeah, man.
For sure. And if people do want to hear some of the stuff you have out already, where can they go to find you, whether it be your website or social media?
I guess my name is basically the easiest way, and social media, there's some stuff up there, and the website kind of shows things that I've done. And yeah, I mean, it's out there. If people want to find it, they'll find it.
Exactly.
I'm not going to push it down their throat. I'm glad that they're even listening to this, to be honest with you, at this point, because that's huge. I think it's awesome. So if people want to learn more, just start with my name, website, and maybe I'll see you somewhere, and I'll be able to shake your hand and say hello.
There you go, guys. And my own personal say on this is, if you're a drummer and you haven't looked for Anthony's work yet, do yourself a favor and check it out. Um, One of my favorite YouTube videos I've seen of you is on your own channel. I don't remember the performance exactly, but you're playing with a jazz band and you do a little solo. And there's two kinds of drum solos. There's a drum solo that's showing off their virtuosic skill, and then there's the kind of drum solo that plays more musically. And you play a beautiful musical solo in this video. I wish I could remember the name exactly.
It's cool, awesome. Thank you so much. That's very cool. I mean, I have to tell you, putting up videos for me is like, I'm pulling out my own teeth. I have so many things that I probably should have put up, but I just don't. So,
That's
yeah.
it for today's episode. If you guys like what you heard,
the whole
follow us
social
on Twitter
media
at
thing for me. I love that older generation
_thekspot.net,
where I
search
really
for The
love
Knowledge
people to
Spot
come up
on
and listen to
Facebook or
music and
SoundCloud, or check us
preserve
out
some
at
of that videos
www.thekspot.net.
online. And,
Lastly, if you guys have
yeah,
any questions
that's
for
awesome.
me,
Thanks
I
for
plan
that
on doing my
compliment.
own personal
No problem,
Q&A
man.
sessions for YouTube, so email me at contact@thekspot.net.
Thanks so much, Jared.
Yeah, you have a good one, Anthony. Take it easy.